Claude Opus 5 beats Fable 5 on agentic tasks at roughly 37% of the cost. Same 1 million context window, half the price per token, and on OS World 2.0, it outperforms every model at any given cost point, including Fable 5's best result. Both models just dropped, and you're probably deciding which one to actually build on right now. So I'm comparing Claude Opus 5 versus Fable 5 across 5 real tests, pulling from verified benchmarks and official docs only. No vendor money, no cherry picking. And yeah, the cheaper model might actually be the smarter one for your workflow, but Fable 5 still holds the coding crown on published benchmarks, and that gap could matter a lot depending on what you're shipping. So this comparison is for you if you're running agents, processing long documents, or just trying to keep your API build from getting out of hand. Because picking the wrong model is a cost decision as much as a performance one, and at scale, that price delta compounds fast. All right, so test 1 is context window and long document handling. And here's what actually goes wrong when this breaks. You feed in a 900,000 token document, the model starts hallucinating details from the middle, and you don't even know until something downstream blows up. And that's the failure mode we're looking at. What surprised me is that both models claim 1 million tokens and 128,000 max output. So on paper, they're identical, but I looked at the community reports and Fable 5 shows real context raw past around 800,000 tokens, while Opus 5 has no such reports. And that's a meaningful gap hiding behind matching spec sheets. Now, take this with a grain of salt because neither result is formally verified with a published benchmark score. The context raw data comes from community testing and not a controlled lab setup. So if your documents stay under 800,000 tokens, honestly, you probably won't feel this difference at all. I was expecting a tie since the specs look the same, but the real world recall data breaks Fable 5 well before the 1 million limit. So Opus 5 takes this one because it handles the full window without degradation. And that puts the score at Opus 5.1, Fable 5.0. Okay, so test 2 is reasoning depth and complex problem solving. And when a model gets this wrong on an agentic task, it doesn't just give a bad answer. It takes the wrong action, burns tokens, running down a dead end. And you're paying for every step of that mistake. So here's what I found interesting. On Cursor Bench 3.2 at max effort, Opus 5 lands within 0.5% of Fable 5's peak score and does it at half the cost per task. And on OS World 2.0, it outperforms Fable 5's best result at roughly 37 cents on the dollar. But Fable 5 holds an 80.3% on Subway Bench Pro, and the Opus 5 number there just isn't published yet. And this is kind of the tricky part because the SWE Bench Pro number for Opus 5 just isn't out yet, so we can't do a clean head-to-head on coding benchmarks. And the OS World and Cursor Bench results are real, but they're different test setups, so I wouldn't stack them against each other directly. Honestly, I was expecting Fable 5 to pull ahead on raw reasoning given its coding benchmark reputation, and maybe it does on SWE Bench once those numbers drop. But right now, the data we have is too split to call a winner cleanly, so this one's a tie, and the score stays at Opus 5.1, Fable 5.0, 1 tied. Now, test 3 is API pricing and cost effectiveness, and this is the one that really bites you at scale because you run a few thousand tasks in testing and the bill looks fine. Then you go to production and realize you're paying double what you needed to because you picked the wrong model. I looked at the official pricing, and this is about as clean as it gets. Opus 5 is $5 per million input tokens. Fable 5 is 10. Output tokens run $25 versus $50, and cache writes and cache hits follow the same exact 2-to-1 ratio across the board. I was expecting some nuance here. Maybe Fable's prompt caching would close the gap since it can cut input costs by roughly 90%, which is real. But even with caching, Opus 5's absolute prices are still lower. So Opus 5 wins pricing, and that's 2 for Opus 5, 0 for Fable 5. 1 tied. So test 4 is response latency and real-time performance. And slow time to first token kills user-facing products because if your app sits there for 109 seconds before the first word appears, users bounce. And that's not a hypothetical, that's a real number from the Fable 5 latency data at max effort. What surprised me is how uncomparable these numbers actually are. Opus 5 at low effort runs 52 to 54 tokens per second with a time to first token of 2.8 to 3.7 seconds. But Fable 5 at max effort hits 63.4 tokens per second with a 109-second first token wait. And since these aren't the same effort level, I can't call a winner from raw numbers. And this is kind of a black box situation because effort levels change everything here. Opus 5 has a fast mode that gives you 2.5 times speed, but there's no matching Fable 5 figure to compare it to. So which model feels faster depends entirely on what effort setting you're actually running in your workflow. Honestly, I was expecting one of them to clearly win on speed, but the apples to oranges effort levels make a clean call impossible. So no winner here, latency is a tie, and that moves the running score to Opus 5.2, Fable 5.0, with 2 tests tied. All right. Test 5 is creative writing quality and stylistic consistency. And this one matters because if a model drifts in tone halfway through a long piece, you end up doing a full rewrite. And that's not a minor annoyance. The output didn't hold its voice and you're looking at hours of work lost. I looked hard for published data on this, and there's just nothing there. No benchmark numbers for prose quality, no stylistic consistency scores for either model, and the community reports I found show wildly different outputs on the same prompt. But that's non-deterministic behavior, not a score. And yeah, creative writing is so subjective that even a well-run test would be hard to interpret. So you really need to get your hands dirty here and run both models on your own actual prompts before you make any call. I was expecting at least some community consensus on which model writes better, but there's genuinely no data to call it either way. So creative writing is a tie, and the final running score is Opus 5.2, Fable 5.0, 3 tests tied. Claude Opus 5 wins on price. Full stop. $5 per million input tokens versus 10 for Fable 5. It outperforms Fable on OS World agentic tasks at roughly 37 cents on the dollar, no context rot at 1 million tokens, and fast mode gives you 2.5 times speed when you need it. Fable 5 holds the coding crown right now, S2E Bench Pro at 80.3% and Frontier Code Diamond at 29.3%, both ahead of anything Opus 5 has published. And the effort level tuning is genuinely useful if you want granular control from about 1,000 all the way to 32,000 plus thinking tokens. I was expecting this to be closer, but Opus 5 is the cleaner pick for most workflows. Half the price, no context rot, strong on agents, so if you're running agentic pipelines, processing long documents, or watching your token bill, go with Opus 5. If you need the absolute best, publish coding benchmark scores right now and cost a secondary, Fable 5 is your model, because $5 versus 10 is really the whole decision.